Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Alhamdulillah, alhamdulillahi wahda wa salatu wa salam ala man la nabiyya ba'dahu bishrah li sadri wa yassir li amri wa wahlul 'uqdatan min lisani yafqahu qawli. So normally we upload our khutbahs onto Facebook, or we kind of do a live stream on Facebook. Unfortunately, we were not able to do so for the next couple of weeks. I'm just gonna record it on YouTube, and then you can watch it later on, inshallah. So, alhamdulillah, wahda salatu wa salam ala man la nabi ba'dahu bishrah li sadri wa yassir li amri wahlul 'uqdatan min lisani yafqahu qawli. You know, earlier this week, we posted a statement on behalf of Islamic Center Northridge. And one thing, before I get to, the main subject matter of today's topic, I understand a lot of people, they're kind of confused. We live in a time, in a situation where there's a lot of confusion. There's a lot of, there's a lot of anger, resentment, because we just kind of got over this pandemic situation. 1 week in, the masajid are finally open. We're in phase 2 or phase 3 or whatever phase you may be in your locality. And now we're able to, we just 1 week in, and all of a sudden, suddenly there's another curfew, right? There's rioting, there's looting, and people are genuinely confused and upset. And I understand that, especially with a lot of the elder generation or the immigrant generation. They left their countries to come here. And our parents, that's what they did, right? They left those countries because they felt there wasn't a balance there. Here, they can provide for their families, their stability here, their safety here, and they left the imbalanced situation in their homelands. They left the uncertainty of their homelands for stability and certainty here. So when they see these things happening, they naturally feel very confused and upset. And what's happened is, after the statement that we released, I noticed that there are two main reactions. One was that people would say that, while we support these movements, these civil rights movements, there should be equal amount of attention to the rioting and looting. We should also address these things, because these things are bad as well. So in this discussion, the part of the mantelpiece of this discussion, while it should be civil rights and justice, it should also be this. So that's the first reaction. And the second is that we shouldn't be supporting these movements, period. We shouldn't support these protests at all, because by supporting them, you are by default supporting the looting and rioting at all, also by default. Now, I thought at first that maybe it's just myself, these are I had like maybe 3 or 4 main conversations, and this came up. And especially with that demographic, with the elder, generation, as well as the immigrant generation. But speaking to other imams, I noticed that they also had very, very similar experiences. Many of them have actually posted statements online clarifying it and kind of addressing this issue. And you know what really becomes confusing? The reason why this needs to be addressed, because as a younger generation, or those people who are born and raised here, we grew up seeing our parents, we're seeing our elders, that whenever there were some sort of uprising in the Middle East, maybe in Philistine, maybe in some other country, where the oppressed people were standing up and they were now fighting back, we would see cheers. There's genuine happiness. People are genuinely happy to see that these people have been pressed for so long. Now they're standing up for themselves, especially our Philistine brother and sister. Not to take anything away from them, but this is the general sentiment that we saw growing up, that we would see that. But even amongst them, there would be 2 groups. One group, unconditionally, they would support any type of uprising against oppressive regimes and oppressive governments, and people would be generally happy that these people deserve it. There's been so much oppression done upon them. They deserve to stand up for themselves, and they should, and we support them for that. And the other may be a little bit different, but where they would look at certain tactics, certain situation and incidences, and they would criticize those certain tactics. That this is not the right methodology for Muslims. But at the same time, while they don't agree or maybe condemn certain tactics and certain methodologies, But they will also admit very readily that, you know what, we're not in their shoes. We don't live their reality on a daily basis. So we don't have a right to judge them. We don't have a right to say or to complain or to criticize them because we don't live the life that they are living. And while we don't agree with these things, but the general movement, they're standing up against oppression, we do support that. So even though there may be little differences in terms of methodology and tactics, but people generally would support the oppressed people, oppress them against their injustice when they decide to stand up. And the same thing goes with Syria and Burma and all these other situations, many of the Muslim countries, whatever our brothers and sisters are going through, we generally support them. So this way, now that you have these two pictures in play, I'm sure you can see the double standard. You can see the hypocrisy where it should, why is it that we can see it overseas? We can see it in other places. But when it comes to our own country, all of a sudden now we change, right? Remember one thing you have to understand. When you choose to make this country your permanent residence, whether through citizenship or green card or visa, but you decide that the long-term goal for you is to live in this country and this country will be your home, you do not have a right to take only and celebrate only the good parts and to abandon in the bad times. You don't have a right to do that. You have to accept the country in its good times as well as its bad times. And when the bad time comes, we do not have a right to turn a blind eye and to accuse and turn on the people who are being oppressed on a daily basis. We don't have a right to do that. And just recently I was listening to a talk by Sheikh Imran Salha. He brought some very important points. He said that when you make that statement that by supporting these movements, we are supporting the looting and rioting, there are three assumptions that you're making. Three assumptions. The first one, by supporting the protest, you are by default supporting the looting and rioting. This is a false statement. This is a false assumption. It's a logical fallacy. Because the vast majority of the peaceful protests that are going on, where the peaceful protests are going on, the marches are being held, you will not see the looting and rioting there. You're going to see it somewhere else. The people who are holding these protests have nothing to do with the people who are doing the rioting and looting. The second assumption is that because by supporting these protests in support of the African Americans or the Black people, they're also the ones doing the rioting and looting, so we can't support them. And this is, again, a false statement, a false conclusion. That is not, when you look, and there's plenty of video evidence, you'll see a lot of people who are doing the looting and rioting are not African Americans. They're not our Black brothers and sisters. There are other people who are doing that. In fact, if you look at it, and there are confirmed cases where in order to delegitimize these movements, there are people who have been instigating the looting and rioting. And there's video evidence for that. So you can't say that, because all Black people are doing the protesting and the rioting is happening, that means therefore they are also doing the same thing. That is not wrong. That is not right at all. This is a false assumption and completely wrong. And you're wrong if you're making that assumption. The third is that the leaders of this movement are okay with the rioting and looting. I mean, again, all you have to do is look at the evidence. You look at the evidence from the brother of the deceased of George Floyd who passed away, his own brother, and all the other civil rights leaders who are there, the African American leaders that are there, they have all been condemning the looting and rioting. In fact, you will see our Black brothers and sisters also going and forming cauldrons around to protect these businesses. So making these assumptions, if these are the assumptions that you have, my brother and dear respected and beloved brothers and sisters, you are being part of that problem. These are all false assumptions. And you know what's strange? As I'm talking to you about this, it's like I'm having a deja vu. It really, I remember, you know what? It's like every time a terrorist incident happens, everyone's like, you know what? Why aren't enough Muslims condemning this? It's all because it's Muslims who are terrorizing and who are doing this. That means all Muslims must be terrorists. right? It's the same assumptions. All three of these assumptions. By supporting Muslims, you are supporting terrorism, and it's because if you support Muslims, it's the Muslims who are doing the terrorizing, and all Muslims. If you support any Muslim civil rights movements or Muslim organizations, by default you are supporting the terrorism that's going on. I mean, this is deja vu here. How many years have we been spending and denouncing these things? Almost every single imam in this country, multiple occasions, have denounced terrorism and the use of violence and things. Yet you'll never see it. Does that mean it's not happening? No, just people are not paying attention. They're just being selective. So we accuse these people, these anti-Islamic bigots, of their bigotry. We call them out on their bigotry, but yet when we ourselves are in the same situation where our black brothers and sisters are being oppressed on a daily basis, somehow we're not able to see the irony of our own hypocrisy, of our own injustice, of our own, just generalization of the African American people, and really our own racism. This is a huge problem within our communities, whether we choose to admit it or not. There's a lot of systemic racism. There's a lot of, especially in our masajid, in our communities, we do not welcome our African American brothers and sisters as we do other people of other races or people of our own race. And that's the truth. And every single, people, there are many people who be attacked. I myself, as an imam, who's in charge of 2 masajid, have seen witnesses in both masajid, witness the racism and the discrimination that goes on. In fact, what's really sad? It seems like, especially from the Indian subcontinent, we're just adverse to dark skin, period. I've heard with my own ears mothers feeling ashamed that their daughters are slightly dark skinned. Mothers saying that. Can you imagine a mother saying that about her daughter? Oh my God, she's got dark skin. I don't know how she's gonna get married. And I've heard also girls complaining about their parents. You know what? Our parents, because we have dark skin, they lose hope. They actually hold it against us. I mean, it's such a sad situation. Really, this is something that is a big problem within our own communities. But that's something I will address at some other time. First thing, I want to take some time out to understand what's going on here. Mm-hmm. When we make these types of statements, Ibn Khaldun in his Al-Muqaddimah, Ibn Khaldun, rahimahullah, was a famous Islamic historian, and he was an Islamic anthropologist as well. And he wrote this book, Al-Muqaddimah. In that book, and this is also, alhamdulillah, thanks to Sheikh Imran Salih, I was able to kind of go through it and read it. And, in that book, he goes into a lot of detail describing different people at his time, the Bedouins, the people who lived in the deserts, the people who lived in cities and royalty. And he really did a wonderful job kind of analyzing everything. One of the chapters in his book is that oppression gives permission or opens the floodgates to the destruction of society. In other words, injustice brings about the ruin of civilization, right? And in that book, he opens up by saying that it should be known that attacks on people's property remove the incentive to acquire and gain property. And what he's, in the very opening, what he's trying to make very clear, there'll be people who will say that, these people who are doing the looting and rioting, why don't they take their efforts and take their resources and invest it back into their communities? Why don't do that? Isn't that a more productive thing to do? Isn't that a better thing to do? But you know what? When you, as a people, because before I continue, these rioting and this rioting and this looting that you see, this is not just an isolated incident. This is just not just happened out of random. This is a result of systemic oppression, systemic racism, something that they have to go through systematically on a daily basis. So you're looking at these these few days of rioting. This has nothing over the 400 years of oppression that the African American brothers and sisters have been facing. 400 years of oppression. So what you're seeing here, you have no right. We really have no right to take these few days of rioting and to just somehow equate it with 400 years of injustice. You know what? We can erase that and just focus on this. We don't have a right to do that. And again, Ibn Khaldun makes it very clear why. He says that, when people, these same people, why would they not, I mean, answering the question of why are they not, why wouldn't they just take their resources and their time and invest into their communities? When you yourself, your life has been destroyed, you have no guarantee over the safety of your life. Every time you step out and every time you see a police officer, you are literally scared for your life, because that's the reality. As soon as they're able to speak, our young African American brothers and sisters, as soon as they're able to speak, they're 2, 3 years old, their parents have to teach them that there are some very bad people out there that will hate them just because of the color of their skin. That's a very, I mean, for a child who barely understands the concept of hate, how can you have to, but unfortunately that's something they have to do. They have to teach them at that young age. Mothers have to warn their children, before you go outside, don't make sudden movement, and they have to prepare them to save their life. This happens on a daily basis. So when their life is not protected, they have no safety, and it's destroyed. Their property, right? Again, we know about the whole practice of redlining different communities. This is a decade-old practice that has been happening. It's not a secret. It's not a conspiracy. Gentrification, it's not a conspiracy. It happens. We see it happen every single day. Communities being redlined, communities being gentrified. So when your property and your life is not safe, how would you invest in something that, and again, people then become of the opinion that the purpose and ultimate destiny of acquiring property is to have it taken away from them. So when you have no guarantee, why would you invest? Right? And these are very important things. Right? There's a story that he brings. And a story that's narrated by al-Mas'udi. He talks about, he's also a historian, and he talks about a Persian king. His name was Bahram bin Bahram. So Bahram had one of his chief religious leaders came to him, and he started to criticize him because of the injustice and negligence that he allows inside his kingdom. So he started telling him, but then the king's like, yeah, whatever. He didn't care about his people. He was very oppressive against them, and he was very negligent. He didn't care what happened. So then what he did, he told him a story about an owl. Now this is a pre-Islamic age. And he told him about an owl, that, you know what? There was an owl, a male owl, who went to a female and proposed to her. You know what the female owl said? She said that I will marry you under the condition that you destroy 20 villages. If you destroy 20 villages, I'll marry you. The male owl said, for you, I will destroy thousands of villages, because it's so easy for me to do that. And he said, this conversation took place in your own country, in your own kingdom. So on hearing that, he suddenly stood up. He showed everyone away, and he took them in private. He said, what are you trying to say? Tell me what you're trying to say. Right? Because now he got his attention. He said, O king, the might of royal authority materializes only through the religious law, obedience toward God, and compliance with his commands and prohibitions. He said the religious law persists only through royal authority. Mighty royal authority is achieved only through men. Men persist only with the help of property and wealth. And the only way to, the only way to property is through cultivation. So the only way you can have property and wealth is through cultivating it. The only way to cultivate it is through justice. Justice is a balanced setup amongst mankind. So everything that you see is all connected, right? And really, this is what the Quran tells. That's why the Quran, time and time again, Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu kunu qawwamina bil qisti shuhada'a lillah. Oh, you have believed, stand firmly for justice. Walau ala anfusikum, even if it's against yourself, because justice is the most important thing. A society, a country that has justice will prosper. They will persevere. But the moment that justice is taken away, this is what results in and leads to the destruction of a civilization, of a country, and of a society and a community. What you see here today is not some random act of violence that people just kind of taking advantage of the situation. What we see here is a systemic problem. Something from the very roots has destroyed these people's lives. Which is why, even not to say that it's right, I'm not trying to justify that it's okay to destroy people's property, but don't overshadow what the actual concept, what the actual issue is, which is there's a grave injustice against a minority in our country, where they can, in broad daylight, they can be murdered. slowly killed, murdered, and everyone is okay. And why should that be okay? That should never be okay. As Muslims, believing in the Quran and the Sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the Sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam is to hold the oppressor responsible first. First, you hold the oppressor responsible, and then you look at the actions of the oppressed. And this is why Umar radiallahu an, Umar radiallahu an, whenever he heard that someone was being punished for stealing or for whatever crime, the first thing that he would do, he would go to the governor and he would ask the governor, did you provide everything in your power with his needs and the necessities? The accused person, did you provide the accused person with all his needs and necessities? If you didn't, then it's your fault that he did whatever he did. And if he did, if the government or the government at that time, the local government, provided them with their needs, then he would say, okay, fine, it was out of the evil of this own person's heart that they stole or they did whatever, out of whatever situation that they were in. It wasn't something out of desperation. This is the sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. This is what the Sahaba practiced, and this is what the Quran tells us. As Muslims, and it's so sad, if you look at what happened, I mean, he was going to a Muslim store. The Muslim store, the clerk, worker that was there, they called them, and also, although they didn't know what was going to happen. But whatever, as Muslims, we should not be the ones criticizing what's happening. We should be the one that in the forefront of removing this type of oppression. Now, in the situation that we are in, what are the course of action? We should stand behind our African American brothers and sisters. We shouldn't go into leader position. Support them. Whatever they're asking you to do, do that. Right? They're calling upon our support and our help in their time of need. As a Muslim, we have an Islamic obligation to support them and help them. Let them, handle it and stand by them, because that's where the khair is. That's where we're going to become strong. As it is, why are you and I in this country? Why did our parents migrate to this country? It's because of the sacrifices of the African American people and the civil rights movement back in the 60s. When they forced the president to sign the Immigration Act. That's why you and I are here in the first place. We owe them. Whether we accept it or realize it or not, we owe them everything that we have here in this country. They built this country for free, without any type of restitution being paid to them. Restitution have been paid towards some Native Americans, even during the Holocaust. The Jews that were killed, that West Germany was forced to pay 3 billion marks over a period of 14 years to the Jewish people. But the African American, nothing for them. They built this country for free, and this is what they get in return. You and I have a duty to support and help them. And I'll end with a hadith of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. This is in Tirmidhi. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, وَالَّذِي نَفْسِي بِيَدِهِ لَتَأْمُرُنَّ بِالْمَعْرُوفِ وَلَتَنْهَوُنَّ عَنِ الْمُنْكَرِ. By the one in whose hand is my soul, either you better command what is good, and you better command and forbid what is evil. Right? So this is not just the Prophet's commanding us. Enjoin what is good and forbid what is evil. Oh, لَا يُوشِكَنَّ اللَّهُ أَن يَبْعَثَ عَلَيْكُمْ عِقَابًا مِّنْهُ ثُمَّ تَدْعُونَهُ فَلَا يُسْتَجَابُ لَكُمْ. Otherwise, Allah will send a punishment upon you, and you will make dua to Allah, فَلَا يُسْتَجَابُ لَكُمْ, and He will not respond to your dua. He will not accept your dua. My dear respected and beloved brothers and sisters, we have to make sure we as Muslims are doing everything. If you want your du'as to be accepted, then we must support these causes and support these people in their injustice, right? And not use this time to focus on things that are completely, that are not really a matter of importance for us. Because very hypocritically, we show our support to people of other races, other ethnicities outside of our countries. But why can't we afford that same support to our own black brothers, Muslim brothers and sisters, right? May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give all of us hidayah. May Allah guide us onto the right course of action. And, man lam yashkur nas lam yashkur Allah. Whoever does not thank people does not thank Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. May Allah enable us to show our gratitude in the right way to the people who it's due, so that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala can accept our du'as. Jazakumullah khair. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.